All right, so let's get started. Seniors aging out. We have two presenters today from the BC Community Response Networks, Jane Osborne as well as Ross Jenkins. So Jane had a 30-year career in information technology management and organizational development, including at UBC and Metro Vancouver. And she retired, as she phrased it, to explore the joys of working in community. She has focused her energies on project and volunteer work on a provincial level, local level, on the North Shore of Vancouver, and more recently in the central Vancouver Island as a passionate advocate for social justice. She is currently the regional mentor with the BC Association of Community Response Networks on Central Island. In 2016, May 2016, she received the SFU Gerontology Research Center's Elder Abuse Awareness to Action Award for her work in building community partnerships, collaborations to support positive social change, coordinated responses, and improved interventions for adults experiencing abuse and neglect. As for Ross, who will be our second speaker today, he started working with neurodiverse populations and those with developmental delays in the 90s. And after several years working in the field as a community support worker, he realized that many people he worked with hadn't received as much information about sex and sexuality as their neurotypical peers. So in 2015, he took the Sexual Health Educator Certification course from Options for Sexual Health British Columbia with the intention of bringing sexual health information to vulnerable populations. Late in 2016, he learned of Jane's work with seniors aging out and of the BCCRM. And his experience with younger adults and the perspectives on diverse populations have proved to be quite important to creating safe and open environments for LGBTQ2+ adults as they transition in assisted living environments or begin to experience higher needs for home support services. So these are the two wonderful speakers we have on today. Ross, Jane, I'm going to unmute you both right now. I hope you are ready. It's just going to take a second. So Jane, say something for us. We should be able to hear you now.
I'm ready.
Wonderful. And Ross?
Okay, and it looks like I'm ready too.
You're ready too. Perfect. All right. So I'll be the one changing the slides, just so you know. But Jane, if you want to start, I'm ready for you.
Okay. Thank you, Benedict. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about our project. What I want to let you know first is that we have a presentation that's kind of a historical romp through the project. I will be trying to keep to a minimum the history part and moving into the significant challenges, the findings, and the why intergenerational and the importance of intersectionality, and putting as much time there as possible. I just wanted to tell you a little bit of an anecdote about this. I did not choose this project, it chose me. And what I mean by that is I first came into contact with this issue through SFU's Center for Gerontology Research. I was asked on behalf of my agency to be a part of the support for a town hall in Victoria. Ordinarily, it would have been the South Island mentor, but she was unable to make it, so I came down from Nanaimo. And I just wanted to let you know that this is what happened when I was there. It was a very, very interesting town hall, but I can remember sidling up to Nicole Tremblay from Island Health, who is now my collaborator and partner in, we have co-projects, and saying to her, you know what, I'm not a very out person. You know, I don't really like being stereotyped or labeled. I don't really identify with LGBTQ, etc. And that was, I can remember Nicole just kind of looking at me in a kind of a peculiar way. And I got through that entire day without ever saying that I am actually a member of LGBTQ. The reason I felt that way at the time, and I still feel that way, is the issue of labeling and stereotyping. And people making assumptions based on just one tiny component of my cultural makeup. But I just thought I'd tell you about that because since then, of course, I have had to come out in a very public way as a part of this project. So that's a little bit of context for where I started. So if we can move on now, Benedict, the plan we have now for you is to really illustrate the issues that we're talking about by using 4 minutes of our valuable time to show you a trailer from a movie called Gen Silent.
I'm not hearing the volume on this, are you?
Nope.
It appears that we're not hearing the sound, at least on the other end of this of the technology. So here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to show you the slide again. And if you can open it in your computers, that might be better. So you can watch it with the right level, the right sound. I'll give you all a few minutes to do this. Of course, something had to go wrong. All right. I hope you're all lined up. I will go and play at least the images again, and we'll join up once the trailer is over.
To be cured. It's not too late for you to be cured of this. Take her back in the closet. She might mistreat me or abuse me.
They're so afraid of it, they are resisting any kind of medical attention.
That person was in their mid-20s during the McCarthy era.
Because it could be unique, it could be their job, it could be families.
We were sick. We were sick. We were considered sick. People were involuntarily hospitalized in psychiatric facilities.
Even electrician.
The degradation of these people is so complete that their sex satisfaction comes only in being tortured themselves.
I was on the route to the nut farm.
So there's a real distrust of mainstream institutions.
I would never put myself in danger.
And he became much more fearful of people knowing that he was dead.
LGBT elders are more likely than the general population to age alone because many gay elders never had children, have not had great relationships with their families of origin. There would be a higher degree of sort of alienation and isolation.
My family was the reason I lost the mom. If they ever choose to catch up before I die, I welcome them.
LGBT aging issues are an epidemic. There's a small and growing group of us.
They're trying to go into the existing network so they become one. One of the common lines with that is like, we don't have any gay elders there.
I wasn't the only person responsible for our death. I would have ended my life.
This is our life.
I'll be there in a few years.
I built a cell like paradise. Oh, with Venice every day.
We have a whole generation of people who don't know who we are. That's really sad, because you're missing out on a lot. We know a lot. We did a lot for you. You wouldn't be here if it weren't for us. Or there'll be no open casket. There won't be anything, right? We are saying come out and be filled with pride and responsibility to make sure that continues right through their last day.
All right, Jane.
Okay, thank you, Benedict. Apologies to those who weren't able to see that clip. I would encourage you to go and take a look at it when you have a moment. So I am going to skip right through Vera and Zeta's story in the hope that you caught the sense of what was happening in that clip. And I think what would be important here would be to have Ross talk a bit about what does this term LGBTQ2 or LGBTQ2S mean, so that we all have a common understanding of the population we're talking of. Over to you, Ross.
All right, thank you, Jane. What does LGBTQ2 plus mean? Most of us understand lesbian, gay, bisexual, the first two letters, LGB, transgender. Many of us understand that as well. It's somebody who was assigned one gender at birth, but throughout their lives has come to realize that that gender doesn't fully represent who they are and have decided to transition into the other gender. The degrees of that transition can vary, whether it may include hormones and gender surgery to represent their gender, or it may not. Queer is a term that's been adopted by a lot of young people who have kind of co-opted the pejorative term of years ago to represent any one or any combination of the above parts of the acronym here. Excuse me. And Two-Spirit specifically is more in relation to some First Nations communities who may consider themselves part of the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender community. It has a lot more meaning that's associated specifically within their culture than it does in more of the mainstream culture. And the plus incorporates queer questioning, gender fluid, asexual, pansexual, polyamorous, and some other aspects of sexuality that are not necessarily included in this long acronym already. If we didn't keep on going, we don't want to have a 17-letter acronym. And the plus also includes allies and supporters of members of these communities. And so that's pretty much that there. And then on to the next slide, number 12, or if we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. All right. And LGBTQ2 plus senior experiences. Many seniors have experienced a lot during their lives. Unfortunately, it's not all been good. They've either been considered mentally ill or even criminal. Of course, most people understand that the homosexuality in Canada wasn't made officially legal until 1969, so many seniors have experienced this, being told they were criminal for much of their lives. And of course, during the height of the AIDS epidemic in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a whole lot of anger thrown their directions, and this represented by the little photograph here in this slide. AIDS isn't a disease; it's a cure. That's when you're hearing messages such as this, it's hard not to be afraid of who might know that you are LGBTQ. And back on over you to Jane.
Okay, so next slide. Yes. So I mentioned the town hall in Victoria, which was my initial introduction into this particular project. I would encourage you to go on to SFU's website. The LGBTEOL stands for LGBT End of Life Conversations, and you'll find those materials there. And it's a series of posters and a series of videos. And these were produced by coming together of two groups, a Youth for Change group from Surrey, and Quirky, which was a group of older adult seniors who are creative folks, photographers, actors, as you can see here, a film buff, many, many different older adults who came together from the LGBT community to work with youth. So that's where things began. Going on to next slide. We're talking about this now for the obvious reasons. I'm not going to belabor demographics. You all understand that Canada's aging. What I did want to emphasize, though, is that for a large part, certainly here on the island, our community has been invisible. It's invisible because mostly we don't ask, right? That would be true of community agencies. Health doesn't collect data here. In fact, census data only recently became available. And you already heard, I hope you heard anyhow from the clip, that as a consequence of these difficulties, criminalization and things of this nature, many LGBTQ people are more likely to age alone and may well return to the closet, even if they're out now. Next slide. So I want to mention two demographic factoids here. First is that younger Canadians are far more likely to say they're gay, bisexual, or transgender than older Canadians. So there's 10% of folks from the ages of 18 to 34 who would say yes to the question, as compared to 2 or 3% in the 4 older age categories. That's a part of the reason why intergenerational approaches are really necessary. Another little interesting clip, which hasn't changed that much at this stage, is when you ask people in residential care facilities, and this happened in the White Rock area recently, well, 2013, so not that recent, whether they have LGBTQ folks living there, the answer is usually no. In this case, every answer was no. We are having that same experience here in Vancouver Island in 2017. Next slide. So really, what we're talking about here is an issue of safety. People need to feel safe to be out. We need our voices heard. The members of the community need our voices heard in terms of how supporters, community agencies, social justice agencies, and health can provide services as we age. And this will just be a growing issue as we go along. So I'm going to talk a bit about the Island Health Initiative. I'm not going to talk a lot about this. What I mentioned is that 2 projects came in parallel, and I think of them as co-projects, with Nicole Tremblay from Island Health starting a project here to bring her organization along the curve on this issue. And at the same time, a community project starting sponsored and funded by BC Community Response Networks. So basically what's come out of the Island Health Initiative is a toolkit that supports leaders. There's a whole face-to-face education module for training their frontline people in engaging with this population. They're doing a lot. So next slide, Benedict. And where they are right now is they're actually, focusing their initial effort on the services that support clients where they live, in particular residential care and home and community care. This will move out, though, into acute care and all of the other pieces of health that need to have this knowledge. And one of the things they've done, you'll see on the next slide, they have said to themselves, right, really, if we're going to do all this training, we need to make this visible to LGBTQ folks who come into our services. So they created, didn't create, but they ordered a bunch of lanyards, rainbow lanyards. So all of the staff that get trained receive one of these lanyards so that people in the community, LGBTQ people, will know, hey, this is a person that's safe to talk to. This is the person where I can come out in the fullness of my identity. They have also taken the step of piloting their education module through 4 workshops. Nicole, and you'll see Nicole's contact information on this slide, is looking at the evaluations of that pilot and beginning to massage those materials. And one of the steps we're going to take next, hopefully over the summer, by the way, Nicole happens to be in Ireland, or she'd be co-presenting with me. Poor Nicole. So one of the steps we hope to take over the summer, though, is to educate our core working group here in community on these materials. Have Nicole come up and actually do that education series for us. You can also get their pamphlets and brochures. So now I'm going to move into the community piece, because this is really where we wanted to focus our time today. So this initiative As I mentioned, I was sort of a person that got swept up. It's kind of really a typical community development initiative, in that what happened to me after being reluctant to be engaged in this whole endeavor at all is that spring, or early spring of 2016, a lot of stuff happened. There was the Pulse nightclub bombing. There was all sorts of political issues in the state, where issues around xenophobia, homophobia, racism, and everything were coming to the fore because of the run-up to the election. And what I was hearing from people in the community and around me was a real sense of dis-ease, a sense of this is a problem, and I'm worried, I'm concerned that things are going to get worse. That is what prompted me to talk to my executive director, Sherry Baker, and say, I think actually this is an important project, and I would need some funding and support, but it's something I would like to take on. And I'm very grateful to BCCRNs for actually saying, yes, we think it's important too. So where this has gone since then is a consultation which happened in Nanaimo. It was the initial consultation. It was held at Nanaimo Library, because I was very, very convinced in believing that intergenerational is the way to go. I had gone to the Youth Advocates Network table, where I also sat and said, I need a partner for this. I need some youth or younger adults to be engaged. And Crimson Coast Dance Society came out. The funny story on Brecon United and their Reaching Out group was that when I looked for adult support groups in Nanaimo, there were none. That was another of the reasons I thought, boy, we got to do something here. There were none. I couldn't find them. And then I found that I had a neighbor living in this very, very complex townhouse complex I live in, who had been a part of starting a group called Reaching Out at Brecon United Church. And it was a part of Brecon's initiative around becoming an affirming church. So right here in my backyard was this wonderful adult group. And these are the two groups that came together in this initial consultation, along with, colleagues that had heard about this in various ways. We had 30, I think it was 35 or 36 people at the consultation. The age range was from 13 right through to 89 or 90. I'm not sure. We didn't ask people their age coming through. But one of the librarians commented as we were packing up, hey, this is fantastic. How did you guys do this? And that was the start of the process. The fact that there was enough interest and energy generated by this intergenerational approach and by this initial consultation that people wanted to come to the table. And now I'm going to turn over to Ross to talk a bit about the people who did come to be a part of the project.
Okay, yeah. So the creating of the team, most of us came from away, so we weren't people who were born or raised on the island at all. I myself am from Seattle and came here 13 years ago. Jane was on the mainland in North Vancouver and a few other areas a few years before she moved over here, and various places that people came from. There's about 15 or 16 people who regularly contribute to the group, and out of those 15 or 16, about 8 to 10 usually show up at each meeting. And Jane has done a wonderful job at honing the best of the skills that we have to offer. We have a librarian in particular who's been absolutely essential to a lot of the work that we've been doing, giving us information, providing us with a lot of great material and a great bibliography. I myself am a sex educator. There's a nurse or two, some social workers and community volunteers and students that take part as well. The one thing is that all of us have a need to work on social justice issues, and this is a project that is close to our hearts, and just something that we really all desire to work together on. Back over to you, Jane. Jane? Oh.
Yes, yeah, okay. So the first piece of the project has been setting goals and priorities. I won't read these because you can all see them in front of you. The issue being, once again, safety. We need to feel safe. We need to have information available. So those are the key things, and most specifically, coming from my perspective, we need to be free from abuse and neglect that may take place as a result of our identity as LGBTQ members. Next slide. So part of the first part that we had to do was put together a work plan, and we actually carved this work plan at the high level into a brochure, which I have to say we have modified 2 or 3 times. You're seeing the first page on your screen now, and what you will see is that right at the moment we're in what we call phase 2, or the discovery phase, and then in the summer we're moving into implementation. You will see as well that what we've been looking for is input, and finding people. We need to hear people's stories. Benedict, if you could just scoop through the next page. So moving right into this phase 2, where we are right now in the discovery phase, we've primarily been focused on, what the heck do we want to do, putting together this plan, putting together materials like posters, presentations, press releases, and partnerships. Next slide. And in the process of that, doing some information sessions for organizations and individuals. And I'm going to mention the survey again. We actually have at the moment a survey online. It's meant for people who are either LGBTQ seniors themselves or one of their caregivers or supporters, and it's island. It's only the island at this point in time. And what we found is we had hoped to be closing that survey at the end of May, but we're not, because we are needing to have a more intentional process. It's interesting, we only have about 35 surveys at the moment. We're looking for more. And right at the moment, we have more males than females. This never occurs when you do surveys. Never occurred to me anyhow in the past. So we are wanting to reach out to more senior women. As well, we're wanting to reach out to people who are accessing residential care. And we're realizing we need some partnership strategies to be able to do that. So we will leave that survey open until the end of the summer and focus on getting this done. In terms of the interviews or surveys, the kinds of things we're looking for is, what has your experience been when you have needed home care or residential care services or community services of any kind designed to keep you from being isolated as an LGBTQ2 senior? What do you need to feel cared for if you haven't felt that way? So it's a very simple sort of set of questions. And based on that, we are developing our materials. I'll just mention that we're heading into an extremely important time of year for us. This is Intergenerational Day tomorrow, and then of course World Elder Abuse Awareness Day coming up June 15th. So we have a huge effort going on right now. Part of that effort is making sure that we have a banner, we have wristbands, we have all sorts of visual and information pieces ready to go with the Nanaimo Pride Week and World Elder Abuse Awareness Days. So where are we going? Am I in your stuff here, Ross?
No, not yet.
Where you go?
No, not yet. It's I've got a couple more slides.
Okay. So
before you resume, Jane, I just wanted to let you know it's 10:30 a.m. So you're halfway through. This is your midway point.
Thank you. So charging right along here, because we want to get to the good stuff at the end of the session. I'll just mention that we've learned a number of things going along, and the value of partnerships, I cannot overemphasize it. The value of our team, being trained, being fully aware of the diversity of the community, I cannot overemphasize. And recognizing that our partners may come from different sectors like community living, wherever they come from, we need to adjust whatever we do, curriculum and materials, to their target audience. Next slide. So in terms of partnerships, here are some lists. I want to highlight our Cowichan Community Health Network, because this is actually the place where I came out as a member of LGBTQ2, and that happened back in November, I think it was. And this is where I had affirmation of how important this project is here on the Central Island, and I have no doubt, throughout BC and Canada as a whole. And the opportunity was wonderful, because sitting at this table, we not only had the full panoply of health professionals, including a couple of GPs from our divisions of family practice, but we had community agencies, we had municipalities and regions. We had a group of folks working on something called the Elder Care Project in Cowichan. This is an extremely important project in our area because it's looking at how we can better deliver integrated services to seniors in the Cowichan Valley. And of course, we need seniors to include LGBTQ2 plus seniors in a significant way. So that is a partnership that immediately, triggered some real interesting feedback and energy to this project. I'm going to leave the others alone for now. If you have questions about any of these partners, please get in touch with us. And I'm going to ask Ross to talk about one specific partnership we're working on now.
Okay, yeah, this is Origin at Longwood, and if you can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. I had the opportunity to observe Jane as she gave a presentation to the upper management at Origin at Longwood. They're a great facility that provides housing from independent living all the way through long-term care for elderly populations or elder populations. And what came out of that was some great conversations and some immediate action, some of the immediate questions that they had is they realized they didn't have any sort of a transgender policy for their staff and residents. So Jane took that opportunity to look up or talk to some of her colleagues about the local island health policies and realized that there was no policy there either. So that's where Mark, our librarian, who's been so wonderful, her team stepped in and was able to find some material throughout other regions of North America where they did have policies on transgender, and we were able to present that to Origins to help them develop a policy even before Island Health has the opportunity to do so. So that's been great. They were also I see here. Let's go on to the next slide, please. We're also looking at the opportunity. Okay, I guess it's sticking with that. We're also looking at the opportunity to be able to provide some education to their staff and hopefully to their residents as well regarding LGBTQ2 issues. We have also developed some other partnerships that include a variety of people, which I'm not going to, or a variety of associations and people, which I'm not going to read out here, except for there's a typo here. Nanaimo Association of Family Living is, should be a Nanaimo Association of Community Living. It's an organization that I used to work for myself, and they are going to be one of our partners in moving forward for awareness of LGBTQ plus individuals. So let's go ahead and, yeah. Some of the outreach activities that we're going to be doing is a screening of Gen Silent, and we're going to do that through some of the film societies in the Cowichan Valley and in Nanaimo and at Longwood Residence, the Longwood Residence, excuse me. We've already had one screening with Reaching Out, the organization that that Jane was speaking of before, where the Val Wilkins, who is a member of our team, is also one of the coordinators of Reaching Out. We had a screening there, and some great conversation came out of that. What we decided to develop was a phone tree and a list of people who are interested in helping provide or being able to mobilize into action if there is somebody within the community that is sick or has to go into assisted living or is or needs some help, even if it's something at home where they just need some help to go shopping or something like that. There'd be some people we can call into action to give those people some support where they need it. We're also going to be providing residential care, providing education to residential care and home providers with the staff training like at Origins and Nanaimo Association for Community Living. There are some events that we'll be presenting at, including the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day events that are coming up later in June, and through INR presentations and some other things, and Nanaimo Pride, which is also coming up on June 10th. And let's go ahead and move on to the next page and back to Jane.
Yes, okay, what you see here is one of the posters we developed. This poster is modifiable, and in thanks to a bit of a shout out to Victoria Senior Lesbian Care Society for finding us, you know, a willing couple to be a part of this. These are part of the materials that will be part of our package that you can modify to your needs. Basically, I'm introducing this here because we need more stories from senior women who are part of the LGBTQ2 community, and I want to go on and just tell a bit of a story that illustrates why we need the stories. So next slide. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to talk about Hawk Owl here. Hawk Owl, you know, because of our connections with the Community Response Network and Gabriola, and with their community social worker and community health nurse, and I'm not exactly sure who, actually, you know, made sure that Hawk Owl got one of our brochures. But she contacted me, sent me an email, and just a little bit about her background. She's 90 years old, lesbian. I was amused in her email when in brackets she had, I think, and I thought, oh, I can really relate to that part. She's an amazingly diverse background, PhD in theater. She's trained in different universities, worked in the Philippines, Japan, US, and Canada, so a very broad cultural context. She retired from UBC after 16 years as a student and then a professor, and because she wanted to go on to study physiotherapy, and she worked as a therapist. Isn't that amazing? Retired at age 70 and became, you know, more or less a full-time artist on Gabriola. Next slide. What was important about my conversations with Hawk Owl, she calls herself a discreet lesbian. And we had more conversation about that because for Hawk Owl, she's discreet up to a point. She did share with me and said I could share it widely that at one point in her life she had an affair with Jane Rule, which I thought, wow, that, you know, doesn't fall under discretion for me. But what she was talking about was her experience with healthcare services. She was out with her doctor when in a relationship. Otherwise, she asked the question, well, why would I be? Now, at this point, I was very aware, working, you know, with a lot of senior gay males, you know, in my working group, that this is a very different question for a gay male. So our diversity comes into play here. The next bullet is illustrating, you know, the fact that gender discrimination, gender abuse, gender-related factors have really come strongly into play for women. Now, when I said that to Hawk Owl, or framed her story in that way, as she told me about what had happened to her as a young woman, where there had been degrees of abuse and you know, gender discrimination throughout her story, and I used that term, she said, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And as we had further conversation, what she said to me was that she didn't think of that as gender issue. She thought of that as patriarchy and capitalism. So we had a different vocabulary, which made me very aware of the fact that we have to have some common vocabulary, or we have to have the ability to ask and be curious to understand someone else's vocabulary. Her life's direction was largely a reaction to being told what she couldn't do as well as a man, which for me is certainly a gender story. So on to the next slide. So the importance of Hawk Owl was, you know, one of the early indicators for me of the issues around diversity. And I'm going to ask Ross now to talk about another thing that we're working on.
Ross, before you start, this is your 10-minute warning.
Okay, I'll make it as quick as possible. So a lot of you already know about the It's Not Right project, being a part of the University of Western Ontario's Research for the Education of Violence Against Women and Children. There's about 4 of us who took the INR training a few months ago, and we came together. If we can go to the next slide, please. We came together and had some discussions about ways that we could make the INR workshop more LGBTQ2+ friendly. You can read through some of these a little bit. There's a couple of scenarios that we decided would be really good to use of the ones that are already available. and kind of reframe those scenarios. What if the person in this scenario was, or the people in this scenario, there was one where there was a woman and it looked like her daughter who was seeing a doctor. What if it wasn't a woman and her daughter? What if it was actually a same-sex couple? And how might the whole situation be reframed, and how comfortable might they feel in that situation? And how does that add to the needs of LGBTQ persons and their vulnerability? Let's go ahead and go on to the next frame, please. All right. So eventually we'd like to have some scenarios that do specifically include people from our community. However, at the moment, one thing that we can do is create a couple of extra slides to address those issues, just as I was speaking of before, but also in the beginning to assure that this is a safe place for LGBTQ plus individuals, and possibly even when we have name tags, show our preferred pronouns to include people who may have more gender neutral or pronouns that are not readily apparent. And we do want to be able to emphasize the needs of the additional needs of people who are in the community and the isolation that they have. And 41. Oh yeah. This is another one of our posters that we have to advertise for our surveys, and these two people are members of the working team. This is Horst on the left and Mark on the right. Mark is our resident librarian that we've been talking about. They've been a wonderful asset to this team. They've been at every single meeting. We're involved long before I got started, and just everything. They're so essential to what we do. It's important to just kind of bring that up, and very photogenic, and we thank them very much for taking part in this photo opportunity for the poster. So their faces have been spread all over town to raise awareness. Next slide, and then back over to Jane.
We're into the findings part, and now I have to go quickly because we're running out of time. So I'm going to explore these two findings as I go through the next slides. If you can move on. So one of the places where I began to realize the complexity here was when I went to a trans care workshop, and this was offered in Nanaimo a couple of months ago. And what I really became aware of is that when you start to layer on some of the cultural aspects for people and our diverse backgrounds, it becomes incredibly multifactored. It's beyond anything I imagined, and it varies so much within Aboriginal and First Nations and in Indigenous communities, depending on the strength of their connection to their culture. It goes on and on and on. So on the next slide. I'm not going to go through this material right now, but essentially some of the material they had I thought was extremely useful for our project. And so the genderbread person is something that we'll be building into, or some aspect of this, into our training materials. The other thing, of course, is that you realize that every community is in a different place. Individuals within the community are in a different place. They've all had a multiplicity of cultural factors that have impacted them one way or another. Next slide. So what this brought home for me were some of the issues around collective versus individual trauma and safety. Speaking of individual risks, we all have individual risks of one kind or another, and that risk of abuse or potential risk for abuse, self-neglect or neglect depends on our combination of cultural factors. It also depends on our privilege. So I have to say that privilege is a difficult concept because it's so difficult to understand what's invisible. I'll use me as an example. I am hyper aware of gender. because I graduated from university in '66. I went to work in a male-dominated culture with IBM, and I had experiences throughout my life, long before I graduated university, that included sexual, gender-based violence and discrimination. So I'm hyper aware of that. I was nowhere near as aware of how privileged I am by being white, being part of the mainstream in terms of religion, race, being educated, university educated, having a reasonably comfortable income level. It's hard to be aware of that. Then when you move into collective risks and you look at, for example, this is something that's really come focused for me, a whole tribe of people being impacted by collective issues like gay males and criminalization and persecution, First Nations, Indigenous people, and residential schools and cultural genocide. Next slide. So why intergenerational? And my apologies to Ross, I'm just going to blast through this because I think we're just...
I understand.
The intersectional lens, I'm going to speak a little bit about that in a moment. But what we are noticing, of course, age is one of those intersects, right? And that as a Western culture, we like to separate. We like to, deliver programs to youth, programs to adults, programs to seniors, children and families. We silo us all. So that intergenerational learning that happens more naturally in some cultures doesn't happen without us being very intentional. So we have learned so much. Just to give you one example, we had a Christmas event where we had reaching out. This probably had 60 to 80 people at it. We also had a group called Gen Q, which is a group of youth and young adults who came and joined with us in a celebration before Christmas, and they actually took us through their view of what LGBTQ2 is. And I can tell you, all of we adults learned a tremendous amount. So that's a sample of why we need this intergenerational approach. Next slide. Intersectional. I'm not going to talk a lot about this because it's complicated and it would take far too long, but I have to tell you, I had never heard that word, really. I might have heard it, but I didn't internalize what it meant until very recently when I was at the BCCRN's annual summit, and I was sitting at a discussion table and saying, this is so complicated, I don't know what to do. Okay? And one of my younger colleagues that I would be pretty sure I would place her as a millennial, maybe, late 30s, said to me, well, you're talking about intersectionality. And I said, what? Tell me more. Then another member of our board, who is a professor at Thompson Rivers University, said, yes, that's right. So all of a sudden the light bulb went on for me, is that intersectionality is absolutely fundamental and age plays a role in that. So if we can move on to the next slide. So this wonderful graphic I picked up from a presentation from, I think it might have been Community or someone else, or maybe some of the stuff that our librarian sent me, sort of, actually paints out in a very visual way the complexity we're talking here. Working from the center, which is the unique circumstance of my identity, out to the very complex political and societal systems that have actually institutionalized new ways in which we disadvantage individuals who do not have privilege. Next slide. I'm not going to read this one either. I'll leave it up to you. So let's go on to the next slide. So what we realized from that is, oh, wow, we got a bunch of work still to do. We have some great materials already, but we really have to put the pedal to the metal, as the saying goes, and start building this more complex, intersectional, intergenerational set of materials, which will include things like cultural safety training for LGBTQ2, recognizing all the trauma many of us have experienced. It will incorporate more intergenerational tools, because youth can tell us things, older adults, about who they are so much more easily than most of us older adults can. And also begin to address some of the gaps that we have, even with populations where we might stereotype and say this is their situation, that in actual fact, there are divisions and uniquenesses. Next slide. So here's the picture of where we're going. We're concentrated on our own geography right now and pulling together these materials. Our materials and package will be available by the end of the summer. We will not have all of the all of the more complex materials in place by then. But we will be promising to have those out by the end of the year. Next slide. Okay, so this tells you about some of the things that we think might take a little longer to do, like more like early 2018, like the cultural safety training outline, because we ourselves have to be trained before we can understand that well enough to put that out as a part of our package of materials. And I hope that brings us close to the end here. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here. This slide is from Nicole Tremblay and Island Health. Just talks about how we as individuals can become an ally rather than a barrier, a supporter rather than a denigrator. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. All right, well, we still have a few more minutes, so if you have questions, now is your time. I did not see any questions through the chat box. You can still type them up, or I will just unmute us all. This is going to be risky, but let's take a chance and see who's got questions for us. All right.
I'm no longer going to go naked in front of a mirror.
Ah. Okay, everyone. So unmuting everyone might have been a little bold. You have a little button to raise your hand. I hope you see it. If you want to ask questions or use the chat box, go for it. And if you want to ask questions later, that's fine too. You can get a hold of me or get a hold of Jane and Ross and ask your questions directly. This is strictly up to you. But do we have a few questions right now while we have a few minutes left? Ah, I see a hand. Leanne. Okay, I think you're unmuted. Go ahead, Leanne. Hello? Well, Leanne, you are unmuted, so if you want to ask your question, feel free. I'll keep scanning the crowd, but I think that's it for now. I guess Ross and Jane, if you want to add something, now is your chance. Ross?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think for us, it's from sitting. It is for sure. Yeah. It's weird on some.
Well, I guess we're not being very lucky. Well, in that case, Ross, you're unmuted. I feel like you didn't get to speak much towards the end. Is there anything you wanted to go over or get into a bit more detail with?
And are you speaking to me?
Yes.
Oh, I don't have anything specifically at all. No. No. Jane, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I just want to respond to the couple of questions I can see in my chat box.
There we go. They appeared. Yes.
Okay, there they are.
Okay, so for me, Jody, I can encapsulate the most significant learning being just how complex this is. From the younger LGBTQ. And the reason for that is when they expressed themselves in a dance performance, they were fluid. They moved back and forth through their identities. They weren't carved out as either gay, lesbian, transgender, or whatever. Their whole story was one of sexual fluidity and gender fluidity. And for me, that was an eye-opener because I thought to myself, this is something as an older adult I can actually identify with. Because I had trouble with being an LGBTQ. I fell somewhere in the middle of the plus. So that would be one thing. And I noticed there was a question from Leanne as well, but my box has disappeared.
So Leanne is asking, she's asking, how has the response from those in care been to education?
This becomes an interesting story here because we have not yet at this stage of the game had enough stories from people in care. And so it's going to be very interesting when we go into, when I say care, into a living origin and assisted living, because my experience and what I know from colleagues is that often it's not so much an issue of educating staff. That is an issue because we have a lot of recent immigrants coming from different backgrounds, so staff have to be educated. But a large part of the issue is resident to resident conflict. So I am thinking that that is going to really our whole story and picture will be much enriched as we work with Origin to screen Gen Silent with their residents.
Yeah, that's the hope, and I'd like to add in there that that we did reach out to some seniors in the Seniors Connect community to have to have again this part of the conversation and some education. And unfortunately, we only had one person respond. Jane got a chance to meet with that person, but unfortunately, the response hasn't nearly been as active as we would have hoped.
And I noticed Jody had a follow-up question to her question around the LGBTQ2 advisory, or 2S advisory. That is a body created in Island Health. It's a cross-disciplinary group that is the group that Nicole Tremblay uses as her sounding board and to support the initiative in Island Health. I'm going to just mention that you know, one of the difficulties that health has is priorities fluctuated and they're all over the place, and that advisory is going to be absolutely key to keeping this on the radar. So that you know, for a health organization, in community, because we're grassroots, we set our priorities. In health itself and big health, it gets more complex. And so as community partners, what we see our role is as trying to keep the fire lit under the senior management at Island Health, try to, from a community perspective, boost this and elevate this priority. But that's what the advisory was about for Nicole.
Great. And we have one more question from, oh no, it's not a question, it's a thank you from Leanne, saying she admires all the work you've done and will continue to do so. We also had Gloria Gutman reminding everyone that you can check out the LGBT resource inventories at sfu.ca/LGBTEOL for end of life, which was referenced earlier in the presentation and is also available through the slides.
Thank you.
All right, well, it is 11 a.m., so if anyone has one more question, now is your chance. Otherwise, we will call it a day for this wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you, Ross. And once again, if you have questions, anyone has questions about this presentation, the contact information of our presenters, or anything about this project, you can get a hold of them directly through their email addresses that are in the presentation, or by contacting me at benedicts.cnpea@gmail.com. We're always happy to help you out. And for those of you who are still on, we have a link currently visible on the screen, which is a short survey to evaluate our webinar. You'll also be receiving that same link via email tomorrow. So please do take a moment. It's a really brief survey, but it does help us out in planning and defining our webinars for the future. All right, well, that is it for today. So thank you very much to all of you for participating and for hosting Jane and Ross. It was a pleasure, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.